Whispers of Sanuki. The mist clings to the mountains of Sanuki province this morning, just as it did 12 centuries ago when a child was born, who would reshape the spiritual landscape of an empire. You know that feeling, don't you? When the fog settles over your own landscape, when clarity seems just beyond reach, and you sense that something profound awaits, if only you could see through the veil. It is the year 1774, in what we now call Japan. The Heian period stretches before this island nation like an unwritten scroll, promising centuries of refinement, art, and spiritual awakening. But tonight, as you lie here carrying the weight you carry, thinking about what you're building, let me tell you about another builder. A young man who would construct something far more enduring than palaces or trade routes, something that would outlast emperors and survive the collapse of the very world that created him. His name was Kukai, though history would know him by another title entirely. And his story begins not with grand proclamations or divine visions, but with the same restless questioning that perhaps keeps you awake tonight. Picture, if you will, the rolling hills of Shikoku Island. The morning sun filters through ancient cedar groves, casting long shadows across rice paddies that mirror the sky like scattered coins. In the distance, mountains rise like sleeping giants, their peaks lost in clouds that seem to hold secrets whispered by the gods themselves. This is Sanuki Province, where the earth meets heaven in ways that make even the most practical mind pause and wonder. Into this landscape, a child is born to the Saeki clan. Not just any family, mind you, but one of considerable standing. His father serves the imperial court. His lineage traces back through generations of scholars and administrators. This is a family that understands power, that knows how systems work, how influence flows like water, finding its level. They are, in the language of their time, among the builders of civilization. The boy grows surrounded by privilege, but also by expectation. Can you imagine it? The weight of ancestral achievement pressing down like a heavy robe, beautifully embroidered but somehow suffocating. His early years unfold in courtyards where every stone has been placed with intention, where conversations carry the subtle mathematics of political alliance, where even poetry serves the machinery of advancement. He is brilliant, this child. His mind absorbs classical Chinese literature like dry earth drinks rain, the Confucian classics, those foundational texts that shaped East Asian thought for millennia. He masters them with an ease that both delights and concerns his teachers. Delights because such talent promises a glorious career in the imperial bureaucracy. Concerns because there's something in his questions, something in the way he looks beyond the prescribed answers, that suggests a mind that won't be easily contained. By his teens, he's been sent to the capital for higher education. Imagine him walking through the corridors of what would become Kyoto University's predecessor, his silk robes marking him as one of the chosen few. The other students see in him everything they aspire to be. Connected, brilliant, destined for the highest ranks of government service. The professors see a future minister, perhaps even an advisor to the emperor himself. But what does he see when he looks in the mirror each morning? What thoughts visit him in those quiet hours before dawn, when the weight of expectation sits heavy on his chest, and the prescribed path stretches before him like a road leading? Where, exactly? The classical texts speak of harmony, of finding one's place in the great order of things. Confucius taught that wisdom lay in understanding relationships, hierarchies, the proper way to serve society and family. These are not small teachings. They built civilizations, created systems of justice and administration that endured for centuries. And yet, something in this young man's heart remains unsatisfied. He reads about the sage kings of ancient China, those mythical rulers who governed through pure virtue, whose very presence brought harmony to the land. Beautiful stories, inspiring ideals. But when he looks around the actual corridors of power, when he observes the real mechanisms of governance, the gap between ideal and reality yawns like a chasm. You understand this, don't you? That moment when the blueprint doesn't quite match what you're actually building. When the vision that drove you to begin seems somehow smaller, more compromised, than what you glimpsed in those early hours of inspiration. His classmates debate appointment strategies, discuss which provincial postings might best advance their careers, calculate the delicate mathematics of marriage alliances, important considerations, practical wisdom for navigating the world as it is. But our young scholar finds himself drawn to different questions entirely. Not how to succeed within the system, but whether the system itself addresses the deepest hungers of the human heart. Late at night, when the capital sleeps and even ambition rests, he walks alone through gardens designed to mirror paradise. The moon reflects in carefully placed pools. Night-blooming flowers release their secrets to the darkness. And somewhere in the distance, temple bells mark the hours with bronze voices that seem to call from another world entirely. A world where questions of ultimate meaning aren't luxuries to be postponed until after one's career is established, but the very foundation upon which a life worth living must be built. He begins to read different texts, not the prescribed curriculum, but whispered about manuscripts that speak of paths beyond conventional success, Buddhist sutras that describe the nature of suffering and the possibility of liberation, Taoist writings that point toward harmony with forces larger and more mysterious than political expedients. These aren't officially forbidden, but they're peripheral. Interesting, perhaps, as intellectual exercises, but hardly practical for a young man with his advantages and expectations. The breaking point comes gradually, then suddenly. Like a river that has been undermining a dam stone by stone, until one day the entire structure simply gives way. He's sitting in a lecture hall, listening to a professor explain the finer points of administrative procedure, when something inside him rebels. Not dramatically. There's no scene, no confrontation. Just a quiet, irrevocable recognition that this path, however golden, however sensible, is not his path. That night, he writes letters to his family, explaining what cannot really be explained, to his professors, formally withdrawing from studies that had been his whole world, to friends who will think he's lost his mind, throwing away opportunities that others would sacrifice everything to obtain. The brush moves across rice paper in the lamplight, each character a small act of revolution against everything reasonable. But what is he moving toward? That's the question that would challenge a more cautious mind. He's clear about what he's leaving, but his destination remains shrouded in the same mist that clings to Sanuki's mountains. All he knows is that somewhere in the wild places, away from the measured rhythms of civilization, away from the weight of others' expectations and the seductive comfort of predetermined success, somewhere out there, a different kind of education awaits. The mountains call to him, not metaphorically, but with an almost physical pull that he feels in his chest when he looks toward the horizon. Ancient peaks that have watched empires rise and fall, that have sheltered hermits and sages, that hold in their silence something his books and teachers cannot provide. Solitude. Space for questions that have no easy answers. The possibility of encountering what? He doesn't know. And perhaps that's precisely the point. His family is devastated. His professors are bewildered. His classmates whisper that privilege has made him eccentric, that he'll return within a month, chastened and ready to resume his proper place. But as he packs his few belongings, not the silk robes of a court scholar, but the simple hemp garments of a seeker, he feels something he hasn't experienced in years. Peace. The deep quiet that comes when you finally stop fighting against your own nature and allow yourself to move in the direction your heart has been pointing all along. Tomorrow, he will begin walking toward the mountains. Tonight, he sits in meditation for the first time, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a practice. The lamp burns low, shadows dance on paper walls, and somewhere in the distance, those temple bells continue their ancient conversation with the darkness. He doesn't yet know that this decision will lead him to transform not just his own life, but the spiritual landscape of an entire civilization. He doesn't know that he will become Kobo Daishi, the great teacher whose influence echoes still through the centuries. Tonight, he is simply a young man who has chosen the unknown over the certain, the questions over the answers, the mountains over the court. And in that choice, something eternal begins to stir. The mountain ascetic. The mountains of Shikoku rise from the inland sea like ancient guardians, their peaks shrouded in mist that shifts and dances with each breath of wind. It is here, among these timeless slopes, that Kukai begins his true education, not in the halls of learning he abandoned, but in the university of stone and sky, of rain and solitude. The path he chooses is older than memory itself, the way of the mountain ascetic, the Yamabushi, those who sleep among peaks and find their teachers in the elements themselves. Each dawn finds him walking higher, carrying nothing but a rough hemp robe, a wooden bowl, and questions that multiply like morning shadows. You know something of this weight, the burden of choosing a path that others cannot understand. The nights when you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake, if the comfortable certainty you left behind might have been wisdom after all. Kukai feels this too, as the first weeks in the mountains strip away everything familiar, everything that once defined him. His body, accustomed to silk and comfort, rebels against the harsh realities of mountain life. His feet, once shod in the finest leather, now bleed through thin straw sandals on rocky paths. The cold seeps through his simple robes like water through rice paper, and hunger becomes a constant companion. Not the gentle appetite of scheduled meals, but the gnawing emptiness that sharpens every sense. But it is not the physical hardships that test him most deeply. It is the silence. In the court, silence was filled with the rustle of silk, the scratch of brushes on paper, the measured cadence of formal speech. Here, silence is absolute. And in that absoluteness, the mind turns upon itself like a caged animal. Every doubt he has ever harbored about his choice echoes in the mountain stillness. Every comfortable certainty he abandoned calls to him from the valleys below. There are nights when he lies on beds of pine needles, looking up through the canopy at stars that seem impossibly distant, and wonders if he has simply traded one form of suffering for another. The weight of expectation has been replaced by the weight of uncertainty, and some nights uncertainty feels heavier still. But gradually, something begins to shift. The mountains, he discovers, are not silent at all. They speak in languages older than human words, in the whisper of wind through bamboo groves, in the patient dripping of water that carves canyons grain by grain, in the sudden crack of a branch that sends deer bounding through morning mist. He begins to listen with more than his ears. His daily practice becomes a rhythm as natural as breathing. Before dawn, he rises to meditate facing the eastern peaks, watching darkness slowly give way to the first pale suggestions of light. The cold mountain air fills his lungs like liquid clarity, and gradually his mind learns to mirror the stillness of the pre-dawn world. He walks for hours each day, not seeking any destination, but allowing the mountains themselves to guide his steps. Sometimes the path leads him to hidden waterfalls where he sits in contemplation, the sound of falling water washing through his consciousness like a natural mantra. Other times, he finds himself on exposed ridges where the wind strips away not just warmth, but pretense, leaving only the essential self that cannot be decorated or disguised. You understand this process, this gradual stripping away of everything non-essential. In building what you're building, you've learned that clarity comes not from adding more, but from removing everything that doesn't serve the deeper purpose. Kukai discovers this same truth among the peaks, as weeks of simplicity reveal what truly matters. The hunger that once tormented him becomes a teacher. When food is scarce, wild berries, mountain herbs, the occasional kindness of village farmers, each meal becomes a meditation on gratitude. The body learns to find strength not in abundance, but in the careful stewardship of what little it receives. Energy, he discovers, can be cultivated through stillness as surely as through consumption. His encounters with other mountain dwellers become profound lessons in themselves. Occasionally, he meets other seekers, hermits who have lived among these peaks for decades, their eyes holding depths that speak of long communion with the eternal. They share little in words, but much in presence. A shared fire, a cup of mountain tea, a silence that carries more wisdom than libraries of scrolls. These weathered ascetics become his first true teachers, though their lessons come not through formal instruction, but through example. He watches how they move through their days with deliberate grace, how they find joy in the simplest observations, the way morning light catches dewdrops on spider webs, the patient emergence of wildflowers from rocky soil, the ancient dance of clouds around mountain peaks. From them, he learns that spiritual practice is not separate from daily life, but woven through every moment, like golden thread through rough cloth. The way one gathers firewood can be as sacred as formal prayer. The attention paid to preparing a simple meal can open doorways to profound understanding. But perhaps the deepest teaching comes from the mountains themselves, in their patient demonstration of endurance. These peaks have stood for millions of years, weathering storms that would destroy lesser things, shaped by forces so vast they dwarf human ambition. Yet they remain, not unchanged, but transformed by each season, each storm, each patient year into something more beautiful, more essential. Watching the interplay of weather and stone, Kukai begins to understand something crucial about the nature of strength. True power, he realizes, comes not from resistance, but from the wisdom to bend without breaking, to be shaped by forces greater than oneself, while maintaining an essential core that cannot be eroded. The doubts that once plagued his nights begin to transform into something else. Not certainty, but a deeper comfort with uncertainty itself. The questions that drove him from his comfortable life remain, but they no longer torment. Instead, they become companions on the path, guiding him deeper into mystery rather than demanding immediate answers. Months pass like flowing water, each season teaching its own lessons. Spring brings the explosive green of new growth, demonstrating how life persists even in the harshest conditions. Summer offers abundance and warmth, but also the challenge of finding coolness and clarity in the midst of plenty. Autumn strips the mountains bare with beautiful ruthlessness, revealing the essential structures that remain when all decoration falls away. And winter. Winter becomes his greatest teacher of all, demanding everything he has learned about patience, endurance, and finding warmth in the coldest places. The snow-covered peaks hold a silence so complete it seems to stop time itself, creating spaces where the deepest truths can finally be heard. Through it all, Kukai feels himself being transformed, not into something foreign, but into something more essentially himself than he has ever been. The mountains are carving away everything unnecessary, revealing the bedrock of his true nature beneath years of social expectation and inherited assumption. He doesn't yet know that these mountain lessons will become the foundation for teachings that will illuminate countless lives. He only knows that each dawn finds him more awake than the last, more present to the profound mystery of existence itself. Voyage to the East. The year is 804, and word spreads through the monasteries like ripples across still water. The imperial court is preparing another embassy to Tang China, the great Middle Kingdom where Buddhism flourishes in forms yet unknown to Japanese shores. You know this feeling, don't you? When opportunity presents itself just as you've begun to understand who you're meant to become. When the next chapter of your journey reveals itself not as comfort, but as the very challenge your growth demands. Kukai hears the news while copying sutras in the morning light. His brush pauses mid-stroke. China, where the esoteric teachings originated, where masters guard secrets that could unlock the deepest mysteries he's only glimpsed in his mountain solitude. The embassy will carry monks, scholars, diplomats. It will cross treacherous seas to reach the Tang capital of Chang'an, the largest city in the world, where knowledge flows like rivers converging from every direction. This is his chance to drink from the source itself. But the decision isn't simple. It never is when the stakes matter most. The voyage to China is perilous beyond imagination. Ships disappear into storms that rise without warning from the East China Sea. Pirates prowl the shipping lanes. Even if the crossing succeeds, there's no guarantee of return. No promise that those who sail east will ever see Japan again. His family receives word of his intention with the familiar mixture of pride and bewilderment they've carried since his mountain years. Their son, who abandoned the certainty of court advancement for spiritual seeking, now proposes to risk everything on foreign seas. "Why China?" his father asks during their final meeting. "Haven't you found enough wisdom in our own mountains?" Kukai considers this carefully. How do you explain that true learning requires leaving the familiar? That mastery demands placing yourself once again in the position of beginner? "The mountains taught me to listen," he says finally. "Now I must learn what they've been trying to tell me." His father nods slowly. Perhaps he understands, in the way that parents eventually recognize their children's essential nature, even when it leads beyond their own comprehension. The preparations consume months. Embassy members gather in Kyushu, Japan's westernmost island, and departure point for the dangerous crossing. Kukai brings little, some robes, writing materials, a few precious texts. But his real preparation is internal. He spends long hours in meditation, not seeking answers, but cultivating the emptiness that can receive new understanding. The mountain years taught him this paradox, that wisdom enters only minds spacious enough to hold uncertainty. Other monks in the embassy carry official missions, scholarly purposes, diplomatic responsibilities. Kukai's quest is more fundamental. He seeks the transmission that words cannot carry, the direct pointing to truth that passes from awakened mind to awakened mind across generations. You understand this deeper hunger, don't you? Beyond the metrics and milestones of what you're building lies something more essential. The desire to touch the source of your own creative power. To understand not just what you're doing, but why existence itself calls you to do it. Spring arrives with cherry blossoms and departure preparations. 4 ships will carry the embassy, wooden vessels that seem impossibly fragile against the vast Pacific expanse they must cross. Kukai stands on the harbor dock as supplies are loaded. Rice, water, gifts for Chinese officials, scrolls containing centuries of Japanese poetry and scholarship. Each ship carries not just people, but an entire culture's hopes for connection across the waters. The night before departure, he walks alone along the shoreline. Waves crash against rocks with the same rhythm that has marked this coast for millennia. Tomorrow, he will trust his life to these waters, and to whatever forces guide seekers toward their necessary encounters. The weight you carry in your own journey, does it sometimes feel this vast, this uncertain? When you're building something that matters, there comes a moment when you must leave the safety of what you know and sail toward what you hope might be possible. Dawn breaks gray and promising. Harbor bells ring the departure call. Embassy members board their assigned vessels. Diplomats, scholars, monks, servants, guards, each carrying private hopes alongside official duties. Kukai's ship is the third in formation. As gangplanks are pulled aboard and sails unfurl, he feels the peculiar mixture of excitement and terror that marks all true beginnings. The familiar coastline grows smaller, Japan becoming memory even as China remains distant possibility. The first days pass smoothly. Fair winds push them northeast toward the Yangtze River mouth. Dolphins race alongside the ships. Flying fish leap silver arcs across their bow wake. The sea reveals its gentler face, inviting trust before testing resolve. But the East China Sea guards its passages jealously. On the 4th day, clouds gather with ominous speed. The water shifts from blue to gray to something darker, more primal. Waves begin building toward heights that dwarf their wooden vessels. This is when leadership truly reveals itself, not in calm planning, but in crisis navigation. The ship's captain, weathered by decades of coastal trading, issues orders with quiet authority. Secure everything. Trust the ship. Ride what comes. Kukai finds himself helping to lash down cargo as the deck tilts at increasingly alarming angles. His mountain training serves him here. The same presence that guided him through spiritual storms now steadies him against physical ones. The storm rages for 2 days. Waves crash over the deck. The ship climbs mountainous swells only to plunge into valleys that seem to reach toward the ocean floor. Several times, it seems certain they will founder, join the countless vessels claimed by these waters. But the ship holds. The crew's skill matches their courage, and gradually, impossibly, the storm exhausts itself against their stubborn persistence. When calm returns, they discover they've been blown far off course. Worse, the other embassy ships are nowhere visible. The vast sea stretches empty in every direction, offering no clues about their companion's fate. This is the moment that defines every real journey, when you realize you're truly alone with your choices, when the familiar support systems fall away and you must navigate by internal compass alone. The captain consults his instruments, reads wind patterns, calculates their position against star charts. Slowly, Carefully, he plots a new course toward the Chinese coast. They will continue, because turning back offers no greater safety than pressing forward. Days pass in careful sailing. Food and water are rationed. Everyone aboard understands their situation without discussion. They are committed now to whatever lies ahead. Then, on a morning wrapped in sea mist, a lookout calls down from the masthead. "Land ahead!" The Chinese coast emerges from haze like a promise kept against impossible odds. As their ship enters the Yangtze River mouth, Kukai sees a landscape unlike anything in his Japanese experience. Vast rice paddies stretch toward distant mountains. Cities cluster along riverbanks with architectural styles that speak of different aesthetic principles, different ways of organizing human space. But it's the people that capture his attention most. Faces reflecting the genetic heritage of the world's largest empire. Clothing cut in unfamiliar patterns. Languages whose tonal music his ear cannot yet parse, but somehow recognizes as carrying profound meaning. China, the Middle Kingdom. Source of the Buddhist teachings that reached Japan centuries ago, but in forms already adapted, translated, filtered through cultural transmission. Now, he will encounter these teachings in their adopted homeland, learn from masters whose lineages stretch back through generations of direct transmission. If he proves worthy, if he can find the teachers who guard the deepest secrets. The ship docks at a bustling river port. Official inspections, document reviews, formal presentations of credentials. The embassy's surviving members, for 2 ships did reach port safely, are welcomed with the elaborate courtesy that marks diplomatic relations between great civilizations. But beneath the ceremonies, Kukai feels something else stirring, a recognition that his real journey is just beginning. Chang'an, City of Wonders. The road to Chang'an stretches before them like a ribbon of possibility. 3 weeks of travel from the coast, through landscapes that shift and change with each passing day. Rice paddies give way to wheat fields, then to the dusty approaches of the greatest city on earth. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when you're about to step into something vast and unknown, when all the preparation, all the planning, all the weight you've carried to reach this point suddenly feels both essential and inadequate. Kukai walks these final miles knowing that everything he's learned in the mountains, everything he's endured crossing the sea, has brought him to this threshold. But nothing could have prepared him for Chang'an itself. The city appears on the horizon like a mirage made solid. Walls that stretch beyond sight, gates that tower above the approaching travelers like monuments to human ambition. This is the capital of the Tang dynasty at its absolute height, home to over 1 million souls, the beating heart of an empire that stretches from Korea to Central Asia. As they pass through the massive southern gate, Kukai's senses are overwhelmed. The sheer scale of it all. The main avenue runs straight as an arrow toward the imperial palace, so wide that 100 horsemen could ride abreast, and filled, perpetually filled with humanity in all its glorious variety. Listen to the sounds that wash over him, the clip-clop of horses, the creak of ox carts laden with goods from across the known world, merchants calling out their wares in a dozen languages, Persian traders with their carefully guarded spices, Arab scholars debating philosophy in rapid Arabic, Central Asian nomads, their horses small but hardy, their eyes scanning the crowds with the wariness of people more comfortable under open sky. The smells. The smells tell stories of their own. Incense from Buddhist temples mingles with the smoke from countless cooking fires. Street vendors frying dumplings in enormous woks, the oil crackling and spitting. The sweet fragrance of jasmine tea steeping in roadside stalls. The earthier scents of leather and wool, silk and cotton, the very fabric of trade itself. And everywhere, everywhere, the evidence of what human beings can build when they dream without limits. Pagodas rise like prayers made visible, their multiple stories reaching toward heaven in perfect harmony. Gardens peek through ornate gates, offering glimpses of carefully cultivated beauty. Mansions of the wealthy display architectural styles borrowed from across the empire. Chinese elegance, Persian arches, Indian decorative motifs, all woven together into something entirely new. This is what it looks like when a civilization reaches its peak, when trade routes converge and cultures cross-pollinate, and human creativity finds both the resources and the freedom to flourish. Chang'an, in the early 9th century, isn't just a city. It's a testament to what you're building, in your own way. What happens when vision meets persistence? When someone refuses to accept that things must remain as they've always been. Kukai walks these streets in a kind of wonder. The embassy has official quarters, of course, formal meetings with imperial officials, ceremonial exchanges of gifts and greetings between the courts of Japan and China. But his real interest lies elsewhere. He's searching for something specific. Someone specific. Word has reached him through the careful networks that connect Buddhist monasteries across Asia of a master named Huiguo, an elderly monk who guards the deepest secrets of esoteric Buddhism, the final keeper of teachings that trace their lineage back through generations of enlightened masters. But finding him, that's another matter entirely. Chang'an holds hundreds of temples, some vast and wealthy, their golden roofs gleaming in the sunlight, their courtyards filled with pilgrims and scholars. Others small and humble, tucked away in quiet corners where serious practitioners can pursue their studies without distraction. Kukai visits them methodically, respectfully, introducing himself, explaining his journey, asking careful questions. The responses vary. Some monks welcome him warmly, a fellow seeker who has traveled so far in pursuit of the Dharma. Others are more cautious. What does this young Japanese monk really want? What gives him the right to seek teachings that Chinese masters have guarded for centuries? You understand this challenge, don't you? That moment when you're trying to prove yourself worthy of something you desperately need. When your credentials on paper don't quite capture the depth of your commitment, the genuineness of your seeking. When you have to find a way to demonstrate, not just declare, that you're ready for what you're asking for. Days pass in this searching. Weeks. The other members of the embassy begin to settle into their temporary routines. Diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, the careful dance of international relations. But Kukai's focus remains singular. Somewhere in this vast city is the teacher who can unlock the next stage of his understanding. And then he finds Qinglong Temple. Or perhaps it finds him. These things have a way of working themselves out when the seeking is genuine enough, when the need is deep enough. The temple sits in the eastern section of the city, neither the largest nor the most ornate, but something about it draws him immediately. The quality of stillness that surrounds it, even amid the urban bustle. The sense that here, serious work is being done. The architecture speaks of both beauty and purpose. Courtyards that flow naturally from one to the next, creating spaces for different kinds of practice. Meditation halls where silence pools like clear water. libraries where centuries of wisdom rest on carefully tended shelves, gardens where the very arrangement of rocks and plants serves as teaching, showing how harmony emerges from understanding natural principles. But it's not the buildings that matter most. It's the presence he senses here, something that makes the hair on his arms stand up slightly, makes his breathing deepen without conscious intention. The feeling you get when you're in the presence of someone who has solved problems you're still struggling with, who has found peace with the weight they carry. The monk who greets him is elderly, perhaps 70 years old, with eyes that seem to hold both infinite kindness and absolute clarity. His movements are deliberate, but not slow, economical, but not rushed. Everything about him suggests someone who has learned to waste nothing. Not energy, not words, not attention. "I am Huiguo," he says simply. And Kukai knows, with the certainty that sometimes arrives without explanation, that his search is over. But the real work is just beginning. What follows is not the dramatic moment of recognition you might expect. No lightning bolts of instant understanding. No mystical signs and portents. Instead, something far more profound. A conversation. A careful mutual assessment. Two minds meeting across the barriers of language and culture to explore whether genuine transmission is possible. Huiguo asks questions that cut straight to the heart of things. Not about Kukai's academic achievements, or his family background, or his official credentials. About his motivation. About what he's willing to sacrifice for understanding. About whether he grasps that true wisdom cannot be grasped, only received, integrated, lived. And Kukai finds himself answering with an honesty that surprises even him, speaking of the restlessness that drove him from his comfortable life, the years of mountain training that taught him how little he actually knew, the sea crossing that showed him how much he was willing to risk for the chance to learn, the weight he carries, not just of his own seeking, but of his responsibility to carry these teachings back to Japan, to plant seeds that might grow into understanding for future generations. Something passes between them in that conversation. A recognition, not just of student and teacher, but of two people who understand what it means to dedicate your life to something larger than personal comfort or conventional success. The teachings I guard, Huiguo says quietly, are not mere philosophy. They are methods, practices, ways of working with the mind and heart and spirit that can transform not just understanding, but being itself. They require everything, and they give everything in return. He pauses, studying Kukai's face. Are you prepared for that exchange? The question hangs in the air between them. Not rhetorical, not ceremonial, real, demanding a real answer. And Kukai, thinking of all the miles he has traveled, all the certainties he has abandoned, all the weight he has learned to carry without being crushed by it, nods. Then we begin tomorrow, Huiguo says. Tonight, rest. Prepare yourself. What you will learn here will change not just what you know, but who you are. There is no going back from genuine transformation. As evening falls over Chang'an, as the great city settles into its nightly rhythms, Kukai sits in the simple room that will be his home for the coming months. Through his window, he can see the lights of countless other windows, each one representing a life, a story, a unique way of carrying the weight of human existence. Tomorrow, his real education begins. Not in books or lectures, but in the direct transmission of wisdom from mind to mind, heart to heart. The kind of learning that happens not through accumulation, but through transformation. The kind of teaching that doesn't just add to what you know, but changes who you are. He has traveled so far to reach this moment, and yet, somehow, he senses that the real journey, the one that matters most, is just beginning. The esoteric path. The first teaching comes before dawn. Huiguo leads Kukai through corridors lit only by oil lamps, their footsteps echoing softly against stone floors worn smooth by centuries of seekers. The temple sleeps around them, but here, in this quiet hour between night and morning, the real work begins. They enter a chamber Kukai has never seen before. Circular, sacred. The walls are lined with paintings of extraordinary complexity. Mandalas, Huiguo calls them, sacred maps of reality itself. Each one depicts countless Buddhas arranged in perfect geometric harmony, their forms radiating outward from a central figure like ripples on an infinite pond. "Look carefully," Huiguo whispers, his voice barely disturbing the sacred silence. "What you see here is not decoration. These are blueprints, instructions, the very architecture of enlightenment itself." Kukai's eyes adjust slowly to the lamplight. The paintings seem to shimmer, to move almost, as if the figures within them are breathing. Golden Buddhas with multiple arms, fierce protector deities with eyes like lightning, peaceful bodhisattvas holding lotus flowers that seem to glow from within. Each figure precisely positioned, each gesture deliberate and meaningful. "In your mountain training," Huiguo continues, "you learned to empty yourself, to let go of what you thought you knew. That was necessary, essential even. But now we begin the work of filling that emptiness with something far greater than what you released." The old master moves to the center of the chamber, where a single cushion waits on an intricate carpet, woven with the same patterns that adorn the walls. He gestures for Kukai to sit, then takes his place across from him. "The path you've followed until now, the path of most seekers, treats the body as an obstacle to overcome, the mind as an enemy to defeat. But what if I told you that everything you've been trying to transcend, your breath, your voice, your very physical form, what if these are not barriers to enlightenment, but the very means by which it's achieved?" Kukai feels something shift inside him, like a door opening in a room he didn't know existed. "This is the esoteric path," Huiguo explains, his weathered hands moving into a precise position, fingers interlaced in a pattern that seems both ancient and alive. "We call these mudras, sacred gestures that connect your physical form to the cosmic forces depicted in these mandalas. Your body becomes a temple. Your gestures become prayers. Your very presence becomes an offering." The master's hands change position, flowing from one mudra to another with practiced grace. Each gesture feels complete in itself, yet part of a larger symphony of meaning. Watch closely. Feel how each position changes something inside you. Your breathing, your awareness, the very quality of your presence in this moment. Kukai mirrors the movements, his own hands forming the sacred shapes, and something extraordinary happens. Something he couldn't have imagined during all those years of meditation in mountain caves. The gestures seem to awaken something dormant in his body, as if his hands remember these positions from lifetimes past. "Good," Huiguo nods approvingly. "Now we add the second element, the power of sacred sound." He begins to chant, his voice low and resonant, filling the chamber with syllables that seem to vibrate not just in the air, but in Kukai's very bones. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. These are mantras, Guo explains when the echoes fade. Sacred formulas passed down through generations of masters. Each syllable precisely calibrated to resonate with specific aspects of consciousness, specific energies within the practitioner's being. Your mountain teachers spoke of emptying the mind, he continues. But here, we fill it with sounds so pure, so perfectly attuned to the fundamental frequencies of existence itself, that chanting them transforms you from the inside out. Kukai begins to repeat the syllables, feeling their power immediately. His voice, trained by years of solitary practice, carries the sounds with surprising resonance. The mantras seem to create their own space, their own time. Minutes pass, or perhaps hours. In this sacred chamber, such distinctions lose their meaning. Now, Guo says, his voice taking on a deeper gravity, we come to the heart of the teaching. The secret that cannot be found in any text, cannot be learned through study alone. The direct transmission of wisdom from master to student. He rises and moves to one of the great mandalas on the eastern wall. This one is different from the others, more complex, more radiant somehow. Two massive circles of enlightened beings, one above the other, connected by streams of golden light. This is the Diamond Realm Mandala, he explains, his hand tracing patterns in the air before the painting. And this, he turns to the western wall, is the Womb Realm Mandala. Together, they represent the two fundamental aspects of reality. The diamond, unchanging, indestructible, brilliant. The womb, creative, nurturing, the source from which all phenomena arise. Kukai stares at the paintings with new understanding. They're not just artistic representations. They're maps of consciousness itself, guides for navigating the deepest mysteries of existence. Most spiritual paths ask you to choose, Guo continues, transcendence or engagement, emptiness or form, wisdom or compassion. But the esoteric path reveals these apparent opposites as two faces of the same ultimate truth, the diamond and the womb, firmness and flexibility, the unchanging essence and the ever-changing manifestation. The master's words resonate with something deep in Kukai's experience. All those years of struggling to choose between worldly responsibility and spiritual seeking, between the weight he carried and the freedom he sought. Perhaps the choice itself was the illusion. When you combine the mudras, the mantras, and the mandala visualizations, Guo explains, something miraculous happens. Your body, speech, and mind become perfectly aligned with the enlightened qualities depicted in these sacred paintings. You don't just study the Buddhas, you become them. You don't just understand compassion and wisdom, you embody them. He demonstrates, his aged form suddenly radiating a presence that fills the entire chamber. His hands form a mudra of profound complexity. His voice carries a mantra that seems to make the painted Buddhas glow more brightly. His eyes focus on the central figure of the mandala with such intensity that Kukai feels the boundary between master and image begin to dissolve. This is why the teachings must be transmitted directly, Guo says, his voice now carrying harmonics that weren't there before. Not because they're secret, but because they're alive. They must pass from one awakened heart to another, like flame touching flame, like one candle lighting another without diminishing itself. Kukai feels tears on his cheeks, though he doesn't remember beginning to cry. Something in him recognizes this teaching, not as new information, but as a remembering, as if he's spent lifetimes searching for exactly this understanding. The path you've traveled to reach this moment, Huiguo continues, his presence now seeming to encompass the entire chamber. The mountains, the ocean crossing, the long search through this vast city, all of it has been preparation for this recognition. You haven't come here to learn something foreign. You've come home to your own deepest nature. The master's hands move through a final sequence of mudras, each gesture releasing waves of energy that Kukai can actually see now, golden streams connecting them both to the enlightened beings depicted on the surrounding walls. Tomorrow, Huiguo says, his voice returning to its normal register as the formal teaching concludes, we begin your systematic training in these practices. You'll learn the specific mudras for each Buddha family, the mantras that unlock their particular wisdom, the visualization techniques that allow you to embody their enlightened qualities. He pauses, studying Kukai with eyes that seem to see through time itself. But tonight, you rest in the recognition that what you seek is not separate from what you are. The weight you carry, the vision you're building, these two are expressions of the same Buddha nature depicted in these sacred mandalas. The oil lamps flicker as dawn approaches. Soon, the temple will wake to another day of routine practice. But here, in this circular chamber filled with golden light and sacred presence, Kukai sits in perfect stillness, understanding finally that the journey inward and the journey outward are the same journey. Secrets revealed. In the months that follow, something extraordinary unfolds within the walls of Qinglong Temple. Kukai throws himself into his studies with an intensity that astonishes even the most dedicated monks. While other foreign students struggle with basic concepts, he absorbs the deepest mysteries of esoteric Buddhism as if remembering rather than learning. His days begin before dawn in the copying hall, where his brush moves across rice paper with growing confidence. Sanskrit characters flow beneath his hand, each stroke a meditation, each symbol a doorway into understanding. The Chinese monks gather to watch this young Japanese scholar work, marveling at how quickly he masters not just the meaning of the texts, but the sacred art of their creation. Writing, Huiguo tells him one morning, examining a particularly beautiful sutra copy, is itself a form of practice. When your hand, your breath, and your intention align, the Buddha nature flows through the ink. Kukai nods, understanding now why his master insisted he learn calligraphy alongside philosophy. Everything here is integrated. Nothing stands alone. The brush becomes an extension of his spiritual practice, just as his spiritual practice becomes an extension of his daily life. Perhaps you understand this integration yourself. The weight you carry, it shapes you even as you shape what you're building. Every decision, every late night, every moment of doubt or clarity, all of it part of a larger practice of becoming who you're meant to be. In the temple's art studio, Kukai learns to paint the sacred mandalas. His teacher, an elderly monk named Master Chen, shows him how to grind pigments from precious stones, how to prepare the canvas with layers of sizing, how to sketch the geometric patterns that will hold the cosmic Buddhas. The mandala, Master Chen explains, is not decoration. It is a map of enlightenment itself. Each deity, each symbol, each color represents an aspect of awakened consciousness. Kukai's artistic skills, dormant since his aristocratic education, bloom under this guidance. His mandalas pulse with life and sacred energy. Other students take months to complete a single painting, but Kukai's brush seems guided by invisible wisdom. His colors sing. His proportions achieve perfect harmony. Huiguo visits the art studio one afternoon and stands for a long time before Kukai's latest work, a complex mandala of the 5 wisdom Buddhas. The master's eyes move across every detail, taking in the subtle gradations of gold leaf, the precise positioning of lotus petals, the serene expressions of the enlightened beings. "Remarkable," he murmurs finally. "You paint as if you have seen these realms yourself." But it is in the philosophy halls where Kukai's true genius reveals itself. The esoteric teachings that confound scholars for years, he grasps in weeks. The relationship between emptiness and form, between wisdom and compassion, between the transcendent and the immediate. These paradoxes resolve themselves naturally in his understanding. During evening discussions, when students gather to debate the finer points of doctrine, Kukai's questions cut straight to the heart of each teaching. He doesn't just memorize the texts. He lives them, breathes them, makes them part of his very being. "Master," he asks one evening, "if Buddha nature is already present in all beings, why do we need these elaborate practices? Why the rituals, the visualizations, the complex initiations?" An older Chinese student scoffs. "Such a basic question. Clearly you haven't understood the preliminary teachings." But Huiguo raises his hand for silence. His eyes shine with appreciation. "An excellent question. The deepest question, perhaps." He turns to address the entire gathering. "Who can answer our young friend from Japan?" The students offer various explanations. The need to purify karmic obstacles, the gradual cultivation of wisdom, the importance of skillful means. All correct, but somehow missing the point. Finally, Huiguo speaks. "Buddha nature is like a perfect mirror covered in dust. The practices don't create the mirror. They reveal what was always there. But here is the secret." He leans forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The dust itself is also Buddha nature. The polishing itself is also Buddha nature. There is nothing that stands outside this fundamental awakeness." In the silence that follows, Kukai's eyes widen with recognition. Yes, yes, he sees it now. The struggles and the breakthroughs, the confusion and the clarity, all of it sacred, all of it part of the path. As winter deepens into spring, the bond between master and student grows profound. Huiguo, now in his 60s, seems to pour his entire life's wisdom into this remarkable young man from across the sea. They spend hours together in private instruction, exploring the most esoteric practices, the deepest philosophical insights. "You have an old soul," Huiguo tells him one afternoon as they walk through the temple gardens. Cherry blossoms drift around them like snow. "I feel as if I am not teaching you these practices, but reminding you of what you have always known." Kukai considers this. "Sometimes, Master, when you speak of the nature of reality, it's as if you're describing a country I visited long ago but had forgotten." They pause beside a small pond, where golden carp swim in lazy circles. The water reflects the sky so perfectly that for a moment it's impossible to tell which is real and which is reflection. "Look," Huiguo says, pointing to the pond. "The sky and the water. Is it the same sky or a different sky?" "Neither the same nor different," Kukai replies without hesitation. "The water doesn't contain the sky, but the sky appears perfectly within it." "And your Buddha nature?" "Neither the same as the Buddha's, nor different from it. My mind doesn't contain enlightenment, but enlightenment appears perfectly within it." Huiguo smiles, the deep, satisfied smile of a teacher who has found a true successor. Yes, you understand. In your own life, perhaps you've experienced glimpses of this understanding. Moments when the weight you carry transforms from burden into purpose. When what you're building reveals itself as expression of something larger than personal ambition. These aren't accidents or coincidences. They're recognitions. Brief clearings in the clouds that reveal the sky that was always there. By late spring, Kukai has mastered practices that typically take decades to understand. His meditation is deep and stable. His ritual performance is flawless. His philosophical grasp is complete. But more than technical mastery, he has achieved something rarer. The integration of wisdom and compassion, of understanding and action. The other monks speak of him with growing respect. This young Japanese scholar who arrived as a student has become something approaching a master himself. His presence in the temple brings a quality of focused devotion that inspires everyone around him. Hui Guo watches his progress with a mixture of pride and something approaching awe. In his 60 years of practice, he has never encountered a student of such natural ability combined with such dedicated effort. It's as if Kukai was born for these teachings, as if his entire life has been preparation for this moment of transmission. The Dharma recognizes its own, Hui Guo confides to his senior disciples. This young man carries something special, something that will benefit countless beings. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when Kukai sits in meditation in his small cell, he feels the truth of his master's words, not as pride or accomplishment, but as responsibility, as calling, as the natural flowering of seeds planted in lifetimes of practice. The weight he once carried, the restlessness that drove him from his aristocratic life, has transformed into something luminous and purposeful. He is becoming who he was always meant to be. Homeward bound. The time has come to carry these treasures home. Master Hui Guo's final blessing still echoes in the temple halls as Kukai prepares for his departure from Chang'an. The weight he will bear on this return journey is not measured in mere pounds or stones, but in the immeasurable value of what he carries. Scrolls upon scrolls of sacred texts, some copied by his own hand in the flickering candlelight of countless nights, others gifted by masters who recognized the rarity of his understanding. Sanskrit sutras that hold the deepest mysteries of consciousness. Chinese commentaries that unlock layers of meaning. Ritual manuals that detail ceremonies unchanged for centuries. But the texts are only the beginning. Wrapped in silk and nestled in wooden boxes are bronze implements forged by master craftsmen. Ritual bells whose tones can shift the very quality of awareness. Vajras that represent the indestructible nature of enlightened mind. Offering bowls whose simple curves contain infinite space for devotion. And then there are the paintings, the mandalas that took months to complete. Each line and color precisely calibrated to awaken specific aspects of wisdom. Sacred geometries that map the architecture of enlightenment itself. Painted Buddhas whose eyes seem to hold the compassion of ages. You know this feeling, don't you? When you return from a conference or a crucial meeting, carrying not just notes and business cards, but insights that could transform everything you're building. The weight of possibility, the responsibility of implementation, the knowledge that what you've learned means nothing unless you can translate it into reality. Kukai stands in the courtyard of Qinglong Temple for the last time, watching the morning sun illuminate the pagoda where he first glimpsed the depth of esoteric practice. The other monks gather to bid him farewell, some with tears in their eyes, understanding that they may never see him again in this lifetime. Master Huiguo, though weakened by age and the intensity of transmitting his life's work, emerges to offer final words. His hands, once so steady in forming mudras, now tremble slightly as he places them on Kukai's shoulders. "You carry more than books and artifacts," the old master says, his voice barely above a whisper. "You carry a living transmission, a flame that has passed from teacher to student for 1,000 years. Do not let it diminish in the crossing." The journey to the port city takes weeks, caravans of camels and horses bearing his precious cargo across landscapes that have already begun to feel distant, like memories from another life. Each day on the road, Kukai feels the pull of home growing stronger. Not just the geographical pull toward Japan, but something deeper. The recognition that his true work is just beginning. In the mountains of his youth, he learned to empty himself, to become receptive to wisdom. In China, he learned to fill himself, to become a vessel for teachings that could benefit countless beings. Now comes the third phase, learning to pour forth, to become a source rather than just a seeker. The port city bustles with merchants and diplomats, sailors and scholars, all preparing for their own crossings. But Kukai moves through it with a different quality of attention now, seeing not just the surface activity, but the deeper currents of human longing that drive all this movement. Everyone here is carrying something precious, whether they recognize it or not. The merchant with his silk and spices, the diplomat with his treaties and alliances, the scholar with his observations and theories. But how many understand that the greatest treasure is not what they carry in their hands, but what they carry in their hearts? As his ship is loaded with careful precision, each box and scroll positioned to survive the inevitable storms ahead, Kukai finds himself thinking of the young nobleman who first abandoned his studies in Nara. That restless seeker seems like a stranger now, yet also intimately familiar. The same essential nature, but transformed by understanding. You know this transformation too. The way your early struggles as a founder have shaped you into someone you barely recognize. The late nights that taught you resilience. The rejections that deepened your determination. The small victories that showed you what was possible. You're still you, but more yourself than you ever imagined you could be. The ship that will carry Kukai home is larger than the one that brought him to China, built to weather the unpredictable moods of the sea between worlds. As he stands on the dock, watching the final preparations, he feels the weight of all he's leaving behind, and all he's bringing forward. Chang'an will continue its magnificent existence without him. The temples will echo with morning chants. The masters will guide new students through the same transformations he has undergone. But something has changed in the pattern. A thread has been lifted from this tapestry and will be woven into another. The captain calls for boarding, and Kukai takes his first steps toward the gangplank. In his robes, he carries the most essential teachings, the ones that cannot be lost, even if every scroll were to sink beneath the waves. In his mind, he holds the faces of the masters who trusted him with their wisdom. In his heart, he carries the flame that Master Huiguo spoke of, steady and bright, and ready to kindle new fires. Behind him, the coast of China grows smaller. Ahead, somewhere beyond the horizon, Japan awaits. Between them lies the vast uncertainty of the sea and the absolute certainty of purpose. He is going home, not as the young man who left, but as the teacher his homeland needs him to become. Chanchufu Chu, Kobo Daishi's legacy. The years that followed would see that flame kindle into something extraordinary, something that would illuminate Japan for over 1,000 years. Kukai, now known as Kobo Daishi, the great master who spread the Dharma, would establish Shingon Buddhism as one of Japan's most profound spiritual traditions, weaving together the esoteric teachings he had received with the deeper currents of his homeland's ancient wisdom. High in the sacred mountains of Ki Peninsula, he would found Mount Koya, a place where the mist moves between ancient cedars like prayers made visible, where the sound of temple bells carries across valleys that seem to hold eternity in their silence. Here, generations of seekers would come to understand what he had learned in those Chinese temples, that the sacred and the everyday are not separate realms, but different faces of the same truth. The weight you carry tonight, the decisions that circle through your thoughts, the responsibility for what you're building. Kobo Daishi understood this burden. He knew that true leadership is not about having all the answers, but about holding steady in uncertainty, about finding the still point within movement, the calm center from which right action flows. His teachings would spread like ripples across Japan's spiritual landscape, influencing not just monks and scholars, but artists and poets, architects and calligraphers, anyone who sought to transform their daily work into something sacred. The mudras he learned became gestures of reverence. The mantras became sounds that connected earth to heaven. The mandalas became maps of a reality where every action, every breath, every moment of creation or leadership or simple human presence could become a doorway to something deeper. Even now, more than 12 centuries later, pilgrims walk the paths he walked, seeking what he sought, carrying their own invisible weights up mountain trails where morning mist still moves like ancient wisdom, where the sound of water over stones still speaks the same truths he heard in his hermit years, where the temple bells still ring out across valleys that have witnessed countless seekers finding their way home to themselves. Tonight, as your breathing deepens, as the day's urgency finally begins to settle, let yourself rest in the knowledge that what you're building, the weight you carry, the decisions that await tomorrow, all of this is part of something larger, something that connects you to every leader who has ever stood at the edge of uncertainty and chosen to step forward anyway. The young nobleman who abandoned his prescribed path, the mountain hermit who learned to bend without breaking, the student who crossed dangerous seas, the master who returned with sacred fire. They are all here in this moment, all part of the continuing story of how ordinary human beings, carrying extraordinary responsibility, find their way to wisdom. Mount Koya still stands in the Japanese mountains, its temples still holding space for those who seek, its ancient cedars still reaching toward heaven while their roots go deep into earth, its morning mist still moving like prayers between the trees, and in that sacred silence, in that place where seeking becomes finding, where the weight of responsibility transforms into the lightness of purpose, where the flame that Master Huiguo spoke of continues to burn steady and bright. There is room for your rest, for your peace, for the deep knowing that what you're building matters, that the weight you carry is sacred, and that tomorrow's challenges will meet you refreshed and ready, grounded in the same timeless wisdom that guided a young seeker across dangerous waters and into the mountains where mist moves like ancient blessings, where temple bells still ring, where the path continues, and where rest finally comes.